The night Sarah found the folder, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She had only gone into the study to grab a phone charger. Instead, tucked behind a stack of old tax files, she found 3 months of bank statements. Statements carrying her father's signature on pages he had never seen. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Outside the door, heels clicked against the hardwood floor. Getting closer, she shoved the folder under her jacket just as the door creaked open. "Sarah?" The voice was syrup-sweet, the way it always was when something was wrong. "What are you doing in here?" Sarah turned around, forcing her face into something calm. "Looking for a charger." Vanessa's eyes flicked to the half-open drawer behind her. Neither woman spoke for a long second. Then Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile that made Sarah's stomach drop. "You should be more careful in here," she said softly. "Some things aren't meant to be found." That night, Sarah didn't sleep. Because she finally understood, the woman her father loved wasn't just hiding secrets. She was building something, and the entire family was standing in the blast radius. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of Richard Walker, a man who believed he had finally found love again, and a daughter who would risk everything to prove that love was a lie. Richard never saw it coming. His children did, especially Sarah, the oldest. From the very first dinner, she felt it, something underneath Vanessa's warmth that didn't sit right. A coldness behind the smile, a calculation behind the kindness. But how do you convince a grieving man that the woman who made him smile again might be the most dangerous person he's ever let into his home? How do you fight someone everyone else believes is innocent? And what happens when the truth finally forces its way to the surface? Stay until the end, because what Sarah uncovered didn't just expose a stranger. It exposed exactly how far someone will go for money, power, and control over a family that was never hers to take. Richard Walker had built a good life, not flashy, but solid. A successful logistics company, a quiet street lined with oak trees, a wife, Emily, who he still called his best friend after 16 years of marriage. Together, they raised 3 children. Sarah, sharp and protective. Michael, easygoing but observant. And Lily, the baby of the family, still young enough to believe the world was mostly kind. Then Emily got sick. The diagnosis came on an ordinary Tuesday. 2 years of treatment followed. Hospital visits, late-night phone calls with doctors, Sarah holding her mother's hand through every difficult appointment while trying to keep her siblings calm. "You don't have to be strong all the time," Emily told her one night, her voice thin but steady. "He's barely holding on, Mom," Sarah whispered. "Somebody has to be." In her final days, Emily had pulled Sarah close and made her promise one thing. "Watch out for your brother and sister," she whispered. "Not forever, just until your father finds his feet again." Sarah had nodded, not knowing yet how long, or how hard, that promise would turn out to be. Emily passed away on a Sunday morning in March. The house went quiet in a way it never had before. Richard buried himself in work. Sarah, only 19 at the time, became something like a second mother to Michael and Lily, packing lunches, signing school forms, sitting through parent-teacher conferences alone. The family survived, but barely. 3 years later, a colleague dragged Richard to a charity gala he didn't want to attend. That's where he met Vanessa. She wore a deep green dress and laughed at something near the bar. A real laugh, Richard thought, not the practiced kind people use at events like that. They talked for almost 2 hours. "I haven't laughed like this in years," Richard admitted to his brother the next day. "Then don't overthink it," his brother said. "Emily would want you happy." Vanessa was attentive, elegant. She remembered small details, Richard's coffee order, the name of his late wife, the team Michael played for. Within months, she was a fixture in his life. Richard's friends were thrilled for him. At a dinner with 2 old college friends, Vanessa charmed everyone at the table, asking thoughtful questions about their kids and refilling wine glasses before anyone noticed they were empty. "She's wonderful, Richard," his friend Dana said, squeezing his arm. "You deserve this." "She makes the house feel less empty," Richard admitted. "I didn't think that would happen again." But not everyone was convinced. Richard's sister, Pamela, pulled him aside after one dinner. "Don't you think it's a little fast?" she asked. "You've known her, what, 8 months?" "Emily and I knew within 3 months that we wanted to get married," Richard said, a little defensive. "Sometimes you just know. I just want you to be careful," Pamela said. That's all. Richard brushed it off. He'd spent 3 years feeling like half a person. Vanessa made him feel whole again, and after everything his family had survived, he wasn't willing to question a feeling that good. The first time she met the children, she brought gifts. A scarf for Sarah, sneakers for Michael, a stuffed rabbit for Lily. Lily loved her instantly. Michael was cautiously polite. Sarah said nothing, but she watched. She's trying really hard, Michael said one evening, washing dishes beside his sister. That's what worries me, Sarah replied. People who are genuine don't have to try that hard. Sarah noticed something else, too. Small things nobody else seemed to catch. The way Vanessa's questions about the children always circled back to logistics. Who handled the bills? Who had access to which accounts? Who Richard trusted most? She asked me today who manages Dad's investments, Sarah told Michael. Not casually either. Like she actually wanted the org chart. Maybe she's just trying to understand the family, Michael said. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe she's trying to understand exactly how things are structured before she decides what she wants to change. Michael didn't answer that. At the time, neither of them realized how right she was. Within a year, Richard proposed. The wedding was small and elegant, exactly the kind of event Vanessa seemed to plan effortlessly. The children tried to be supportive. Lily started calling her Nessa. Michael invited her to his games. Sarah smiled in the photos and said the right things, but underneath, something kept nagging at her. It started with the questions. So when your father retires, Vanessa asked one evening, swirling wine in her glass. What happens to the house? Is it just left to you kids, or? I don't really know, Sarah said carefully. We've never talked about it. Interesting, Vanessa said, smiling. You'd think he'd have a plan by now. At first, it seemed like harmless curiosity. New wives ask about finances. It's normal, but the questions never stopped. About the business, about the property, about who was named where, and what was owed to whom. One night, Sarah overheard Vanessa ask Richard, almost casually, whether he'd ever considered adding her name to the deed of the company headquarters, just to simplify things, in case anything ever happened. It's just practical, Vanessa said, refilling his glass. Married couples do it all the time. I'll think about it, Richard said. Sarah, listening from the hallway, felt something cold settle in her chest. Her mother had spent 15 years helping build that company alongside her father. It had never once needed simplifying before. And slowly, quietly, the incidents began. It started small. A misplaced calendar reminder. A message that somehow never reached its recipient. A birthday gift Sarah swore she'd given Lily, one Vanessa claimed never arrived. I definitely gave it to her, Sarah told Michael, frustrated. I wrapped it myself. Lily said she never got anything, Michael said carefully. Maybe it just got lost somewhere. Things kept getting lost. Michael, ever the peacekeeper, tried to stay neutral as long as he could. Maybe you're reading too much into small stuff, he told Sarah once, after she pointed out yet another inconsistency. Dad's happy. Isn't that what matters? Happy isn't the same as safe, Sarah snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm the only one seeing this. I'm not saying you're wrong, Michael said carefully. I'm saying I don't want to blow up the one good thing Dad has left over a feeling. It would take months and a lot more missing things before Michael's neutrality finally cracked. Conversations got twisted. Richard would mention something Sarah supposedly said, something cruel, something she never said, and when she denied it, Vanessa would simply shrug. Maybe I misunderstood, she'd say sweetly. I must have heard it wrong. But somehow, every misunderstanding made Sarah look difficult. Every lost message made her look careless. Every misheard comment made her look unkind. And every single time, Vanessa came out looking patient, calm, the reasonable one in the room. It got worse around Lily's school recital. Vanessa had promised to pick up the cupcakes Lily was supposed to bring for her class. She forgot. When Lily came home in tears because she'd shown up to her own recital with nothing for the bake sale table, Vanessa was quick with an explanation. I told Richard to handle it, she said smoothly. He must have forgotten. Richard, who had never been told anything of the sort, apologized to his daughter and quietly absorbed the blame. Sarah pulled Lily aside later. Did Nessa actually tell you she'd get the cupcakes? Lily nodded, eyes red. She promised. Did you tell Dad that? She said it would just cause drama, Lily whispered. She said grown-ups handle things between themselves. It was a small thing. a school bake sale. But to Sarah, it was a pattern crystallizing in real time. Vanessa creating the failure, then quietly redirecting the blame, and coaching the youngest member of the family not to say anything about it. Michael had his own version of the same story. A scholarship form that needed their father's signature went missing for 2 weeks, right before the deadline, only to reappear, signed, the day after the deadline had quietly passed. She said she put it on Dad's desk, Michael told Sarah, his voice tight. Dad swears he never saw it. And somehow it still got signed. By someone, Michael said. I don't actually know if that's Dad's signature anymore. That added uncertainty. The idea that even signatures inside the house could no longer be trusted sat heavier with Sarah than almost anything else that had happened so far. One afternoon, Sarah walked past the kitchen and heard Vanessa on the phone. Her voice was different, sharper, colder than Sarah had ever heard it. Once the refinancing clears, the property transfers cleanly. He won't even notice until it's already done. Sarah froze in the hallway. Just keep the paperwork moving, Vanessa continued. I'll handle Richard. Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. She wanted to burst in, demand answers, scream the truth at the top of her lungs. Instead, she backed away quietly and waited until Vanessa hung up. When she finally confronted her that evening, Vanessa barely blinked. You were eavesdropping? She asked, almost amused. Sarah, that's a business call about insurance refinancing. Nothing more. I heard what you said. You heard part of a conversation and decided to build a conspiracy out of it. Vanessa's tone softened into something almost pitying. I know this is hard. New marriages are hard for kids to accept. But this isn't healthy. That night, Sarah told her father everything. Richard listened, but his face stayed unreadable. Dad, I'm telling you what I heard. You heard a phone call you didn't understand, he said quietly. Sarah, I love that you're protective, but I need you to trust me on this. I'm not trying to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I'm trying to protect you. From my own wife? Richard's voice rose. Do you hear how that sounds? The words hit harder than Sarah expected. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall in front of him. I just don't want you to lose everything Mom worked for, she whispered. That's all. Richard didn't respond. He just walked away. If you're still watching up to now, type, I'm still here, in the comment section. That night, alone in her childhood bedroom, Sarah finally let herself cry. Not just over the argument. Over the years since her mother's death, the responsibility she carried far too young, and now the fear that the one person she was trying to protect saw her as the enemy. In the weeks that followed, something in the house shifted permanently. Family dinners, once loud and chaotic, became rare and tense. Holiday traditions Emily had built over 16 years quietly disappeared, replaced by new ones Vanessa preferred. Visits to Richard's office became uncomfortable, monitored, brief. Michael noticed it too. Dad barely talks to us anymore unless she's in the room, he told Sarah one night. She's making herself the only version of him we get access to, Sarah said. That's not an accident. Even Lily, once Vanessa's biggest fan, started pulling away. She gets upset when I talk about Mom, Lily admitted quietly one evening. She says it's disrespectful to bring up the past. Sarah's jaw tightened. What did Dad say when you told him? I didn't, Lily whispered. I was scared. That was the moment Sarah realized this had stopped being about hurt feelings or jealousy. It was control. Thanksgiving made it obvious to people outside the house too. Pamela hadn't seen the kids in months. When she finally got an invitation, it came with conditions attached. Vanessa wants to keep it small this year, Richard explained over the phone. Just us. Richard, I haven't seen my own niece and nephew since spring. I know. Next time. There wasn't a next time, not for almost a year. When Pamela finally did visit, she pulled Sarah aside in the kitchen. Your father looks tired, she said quietly. Smaller somehow, like he's shrinking into himself. He doesn't see how isolated we all are, Sarah said. Including him. Does he know you feel that way? I've told him, Sarah said. He doesn't believe me. Pamela squeezed her hand. Then you keep telling him, even if he doesn't believe you yet. When Pamela tried raising her concerns directly with Richard later that evening, he grew defensive almost instantly. You sound exactly like Sarah, he said. Maybe that should tell you something, Pamela replied. Or maybe my own family just can't stand to see me settled, Richard said, his voice tight. I'm tired of being treated like I can't see what's in front of me. Pamela didn't push further that night. But she left worried in a way she hadn't been in years. Even the neighbors noticed. Mrs. Alvarez next door, who used to wave Richard down for coffee every other weekend, mentioned to Sarah one afternoon that she hadn't seen much of her father lately. "Your dad used to be out here all the time," she said. "Now I barely see the porch light on." Sarah forced a smile and said he'd just been busy. But walking back inside, she felt the truth settle over her like a weight. The walls weren't just going up around the family. They were going up around her father, one polite excuse at a time. By the following spring, Michael had moved into a dorm a full semester earlier than planned. Telling Sarah privately, it was easier than spending another summer walking on eggshells at home. Lily, only 12, didn't have that option. She was the one left absorbing the silence every single day. And then came the discovery in the study. The folder, the bank statements, the signature that wasn't really her father's handwriting, just a careful imitation of it. Among the papers was a draft deed transferring partial ownership of the family home into a trust Sarah had never heard of, with Vanessa listed as trustee and Richard listed only as a beneficiary, not an owner. Another page outlined changes to his retirement accounts, redirecting a portion of the distributions to an account in Vanessa's name alone. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. Someone was executing a plan. Quietly, patiently, piece by piece. And Sarah was the only one who could see it happening. Sarah started small, copying documents when she could, writing down dates, saving screenshots of strange messages before they mysteriously disappeared. But Vanessa was careful, frighteningly careful. Every time Sarah found a thread to pull, there was already an explanation waiting. "That account is for emergency repairs. Your father asked me to handle that paperwork himself. You're remembering it wrong, sweetheart." When Sarah pushed harder, Richard pushed back even harder. "You need to let this go," he told her one night, exhausted. "I can't keep refereeing this." "I'm not trying to start a war, Dad. It feels like you are." His voice cracked with something between anger and grief. "Sometimes I think you just can't stand to see me happy with someone who isn't your mother." The accusation cut deeper than anything Vanessa had ever said. "That's not fair," Sarah whispered. "Maybe not," Richard said. "But it's how it feels." He walked out before she could respond. What Richard didn't say, what he could barely admit to himself, was that some nights he lay awake replaying the same inconsistencies Sarah had pointed out. He told himself he was choosing peace. Other nights, he wondered if he was really just choosing not to look. Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time that night, staring at nothing. Every instinct told her to stop, to protect what was left of her relationship with her father by simply staying quiet. But quiet was exactly what Vanessa needed from all of them. So instead, she called her brother. "Michael, I need your help." "With what?" "Proving I'm not crazy." Over the following weeks, the siblings quietly built a case. Michael remembered specific arguments that had started right after Vanessa misunderstood something. Lily recalled exact phrases Vanessa used to discourage her from mentioning their mother. Sarah cross-referenced bank statements against dates Vanessa claimed to be somewhere else entirely. Bills that should have existed vanished. A bracelet that belonged to their mother disappeared from a drawer no one but family ever opened. Bank records showed transfers that didn't match anything Richard remembered approving. When Sarah asked Richard about the bracelet, he just looked tired. "I don't know, Sarah. Maybe it got misplaced during the renovation." "Dad, nothing else from that drawer is even out of place. I don't have the energy for this right now." Piece by piece, the picture darkened. One night, Sarah almost got caught. She was photographing a stack of bank statements at the kitchen table when she heard Vanessa's car pull into the driveway earlier than expected. She fumbled to put everything back exactly as she'd found it, her hands shaking so badly she dropped one folder onto the floor. By the time Vanessa walked through the door, Sarah was standing at the sink, rinsing a coffee mug that didn't need rinsing. "You're up late," Vanessa said, watching her a beat too long. "Couldn't sleep," Sarah said, keeping her voice even. Vanessa's eyes drifted toward the table, then back to Sarah. She didn't say anything else. But the next morning, the lock on the study door had been changed. Sarah didn't mention it to anyone except Michael. "She knows something's up," Sarah whispered on the phone. "Then we move faster," Michael said, "before she has time to clean anything up." They split the work between them. Michael focused on the financial paperwork he could legally access as a co-signer on an old joint account from their mother's estate. Lily, too young to gather evidence herself, became their eyes inside the house. noting which days Vanessa left for unexplained meetings and which calls she took outside on the porch where no one could overhear. She talks to someone on Tuesdays, Lily reported one week. Always Tuesdays. Always outside. It wasn't much, but it was one more thread in a growing rope. One night, Lily crawled into Sarah's bed, unable to sleep. "What if Dad picks her over us?" she whispered into the dark. Sarah pulled her close. "He won't. Not when he sees what we've seen." "You don't know that." "No," Sarah admitted. "But I know what happens if we do nothing. And I'd rather lose this fight trying than lose it by staying quiet." Lily fell asleep eventually, curled against her sister's side, the way she used to when their mother was the one keeping the nightmares away. But the deeper they dug, the more they understood the risk. If they were wrong, they would lose their father forever. If they were right, they might lose him anyway, because exposing Vanessa meant forcing Richard to face a truth he didn't want to see. The breakthrough came from somewhere none of them expected. A woman named Carol reached out to Sarah online, claiming she once dated a man Vanessa had been involved with years earlier. "I saw your post asking if anyone recognized her," Carol wrote. "I need to tell you what happened to us." According to Carol, Vanessa had done this before. Different details, different city, but the same pattern. Charm a wealthy, grieving widower. Slowly gain access to his finances. Quietly create conflict between him and the people closest to him. Then walk away once she had what she came for. By the time he realized what was happening, Carol wrote, half his savings were gone, and his own brother wasn't speaking to him anymore. Sarah wrote back immediately, "Did you ever go to the police?" "We didn't have enough proof," Carol replied. "By the time I understood what was happening, she was already gone, and so was a lot of money. I just didn't want another family to go through what mine did." Sarah read that line 3 times. Another family. As if theirs were simply the next name on a list. Sarah's hands trembled reading it. With Carol's account and the documents they'd already gathered, the siblings made a decision that terrified them. It wasn't an easy decision. An investigator meant spending money none of them had to spare and risking everything if it turned out they were wrong. "What if we're wrong?" Michael asked quietly. "What if this destroys what's left of the family for nothing?" "What if we're right?" Sarah said. "And we never tried." Michael didn't have an answer for that. 3 days later, they hired a private investigator. Weeks later, the investigator's findings landed on the table like a verdict. Multiple prior relationships, each ending the same way. A pattern of property transfers. Communication records showing Vanessa discussing the transition and moving funds before he asks questions. Almost word for word what Sarah had overheard months earlier. The investigator had warned them from the start that confirming a pattern like this would take time, careful sourcing, and patience none of them felt they had left. Weeks passed in near silence as records were requested, prior addresses traced, and old filings pulled from counties 3 states away. The report ran 19 pages. It traced Vanessa through 2 previous marriages under slightly different versions of her name, each ending within a few years of significant asset transfers. It also flagged something else, an active life insurance policy Vanessa had quietly taken out on Richard 18 months earlier, with herself listed as the sole beneficiary, filed without his knowledge through a broker she had used in a previous marriage. One line, near the end of the report, stayed with Sarah longer than the rest. Investigators believe the pattern had likely affected at least 4 households over 12 years. For households. For families who had once sat around dinner tables, just like theirs, believing they were safe. This wasn't paranoia. It was evidence. Sarah requested one final meeting with her father. Not to argue, just to show him everything. Richard sat across from her at the same kitchen table where he'd once accused her of jealousy. This time, he didn't interrupt. He read every document, listened to every recording, reviewed every date, every transfer, every inconsistency Vanessa had explained away a dozen times before. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is the moment everything finally breaks open. Hours passed. Richard didn't speak. He simply stared at the papers in front of him, his jaw tightening with every page. Finally, he looked up. "Get her in here," he said quietly. "Now." When Vanessa walked into the room and saw the documents spread across the table, her expression flickered, just for a second, before settling back into practiced calm. "Richard, whatever they've told you, is it true?" His voice was low, controlled. dangerous in a way his children had never heard before. You're going to trust strangers and a jealous daughter over your own wife. Answer the question, Vanessa. Silence stretched across the room. I did what I had to do to protect myself, she finally said, her voice losing its warmth entirely. You think I married you for charity work and family dinners? The room went still. Richard's face drained of color. Get out of my house. This is my house too. Not anymore. Behind Richard, Michael stood with his arms crossed, refusing to look away. Lily clung to Sarah's side, finally understanding why her sister had pushed so hard, for so long, against so much resistance. Vanessa looked at each of them in turn, searching for even one face that might still be on her side. She found none. The divorce that followed was long, complicated, and expensive, but with the evidence the siblings had gathered, Vanessa's attempts to claim a larger share of the estate collapsed almost immediately. She left the marriage with far less than she had planned, and far more exposed than she ever expected. Vanessa's lawyer fought every claim for months, dragging out depositions and demanding re-examinations of evidence the investigator had already verified twice over. There were nights Sarah wondered if it would ever actually end, if Vanessa would simply outlast them through sheer persistence the way she'd outlasted every accusation before. But this time, the paper trail didn't bend the way conversations once had. Documents didn't change their story depending on who was in the room. For Richard, the aftermath was harder than the confrontation itself. He spent weeks barely speaking, replaying every warning sign he had ignored, every argument where he had chosen Vanessa's version of events over his own daughter's. One evening, he found Sarah on the back porch, staring out at nothing. I should have listened to you, he said quietly, sitting beside her. You were grieving and lonely, Sarah said. She knew exactly how to use that. That doesn't excuse what I said to you. No, Sarah admitted. But I understand it now. Richard reached over and took her hand the way he used to when she was a little girl. Thank you for not giving up, even when I gave you every reason to. It took months for trust to fully return. Family dinners came back slowly, first awkward, then familiar, then warm again in a way none of them had felt since before Emily passed away. Old traditions resurfaced. Michael started inviting Sarah and Lily to his games again. Lily finally felt safe enough to talk about her mother without fear of upsetting anyone. One Sunday, almost a year after the divorce was finalized, the four of them sat down together for dinner at the same table where so much had unraveled. Richard raised his glass. To getting it right, even when it's late, he said. To never going quiet again, Sarah added. Lily giggled at the seriousness in both their voices, and for a moment, the room felt exactly like it used to, back when their mother was the one setting the table. Sarah looked around at her father, her brother, and her little sister, and let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in a long time. Not relief exactly. Something steadier than that. The quiet certainty that she had done the one thing that mattered most. She hadn't stayed silent when silence was easiest. The wounds never disappeared completely, but the family that remained was stronger for having survived them. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't arrive wearing a villain's face. Sometimes it arrives with a smile, a soft voice, and just enough warmth to make you lower your guard. And that's exactly why truth, patience, and the people who refuse to stay silent matter more than any performance of perfection ever could. Vanessa never contacted the family again. The last anyone heard, she had moved to another state entirely, already starting over under circumstances no one in the Walker family cared to follow. For Richard and his children, that was enough. They didn't need an ending for her story. They only needed the truth of their own. Around the neighborhood, people still talk about the Walker family sometimes, about the quiet woman who almost took everything, and the daughter who refused to let her. Some call it a lesson about money. Others call it a lesson about grief, and how easily it can be used against the people carrying it. The Walkers call it the year they almost lost each other, and the year they didn't. So now we want to know, what would you have done if you were Sarah? Would you have kept fighting for the truth, even when your own father didn't believe you? Or would you have walked away to protect the peace? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story kept you hooked from start to finish, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because our next story of betrayal, secrets, and justice is even more shocking than this one.